Hi, and welcome to the Discourse KE. My name is Chenyenyozi, and I am your host. So with me is Faith, who will introduce herself. So what we are talking about today is the Ethiopian situation. So Faith, karibu, tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me here again. So my name is Faith Sambu. I am a lawyer interested in international law and international affairs. Yeah.
Karibu sana.
Yeah.
Your conversation last time was on what?
My conversation last time was on Kenya's foreign policy. So we talked about the Somalia, it was actually before the judgment on the ICJ case between Somalia and Kenya. So we talked about that and largely our foreign policy right now.
So now, with that, let's just get right into it. So what is the situation in Ethiopia? Like, is Ethiopia at war? Is it a full-blown war?
So yes, there's a war going on, definitely, that's a war. But I think to understand, first of all, the war is between the Ethiopian government, also called the federal government, and the TPLF, which is in full the Tigray People's Liberation Front.
Okay.
It's a party. It's a political party made up of people of the Tigrayan descent. So there is currently a war between the federal government, largely the federal government, and the TPLF. There are other actors also as part of the war.
Right.
There's the Eritrean forces are there. Eritreans are there, making it an international conflict. We call it international armed conflict. Previously, just before the Eritreans got in, it was a international armed conflict.
Because it was just TPLF against
the federal government. It was an internal matter. But still, a matter of international concern regardless.
Right.
But when the Eritreans came in, transformed it into an international armed conflict.
Okay. In what capacity have the Eritreans come in?
So, for us to understand why, the short answer to that is they got support from they got the invitation from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed,
who brokered peace.
Yes, with Eritrea. But to actually understand why Eritrea is inside this war, we have to look at the history.
So take us back in time, please.
Yes. So now, let's start with around 1963, because that's the time many African countries were getting independence, and that's when we all became aware of Ethiopia. But even just studying history as Africans, we know that Ethiopia was never colonized.
Right.
Ethiopia defeated the Italians and pushed them out of Ethiopia. So, and this is why Ethiopia has such an important place in Africa, because it is a symbol of resistance of imperialism. So at that time, you remember one of the founders of the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, when it was being formed in 1963, was the Emperor Haile Selassie, right? He was the ruler of Ethiopia. Ethiopia was had an imperial emperor system, right? And so politics was centralized, you see, all under one ruler. It is important to note that Haile Selassie comes from the Amhara region. He's Amharan.
Which is a minority group?
No. It's the second largest group in Ethiopia.
Okay.
So before I get into the history, let me just say, Ethiopia has over 80 ethnicities. But then there are major ethnicities that we'll come to. But Haile Selassie was Amharan. Ethiopians speak Amharic as the official language, right? So during that period with an imperial system, of course, there's bound to be a lot of repression, a lot of human rights violations, some people feel marginalized or sidelined. So what happened is people got so tired. And then it was during the Cold War. A new revolutionary movement came up called the Darg regime, headed by Mengistu, Haile Mariam. So Mengistu led this revolution. He was supported by the Russians. It was a Marxist communist revolution. Led this revolution around the 70s, and then a successful coup against the emperor and the imperial system, and established a communist government in Ethiopia, which was still centralized. So they ruled Ethiopia up to around mid-80s. Remember when there was the famous famine, Ethiopia famine, where even Kina Michael Jackson came up with a song, We Are the World. That was during the Darg regime. And then still, there were people feeling marginalized and sidelined. So what happened? They said, we need to overthrow this DAG regime. So they came together. At that time, there was no such country called Eritrea. Eritrea was actually part of Ethiopia. They were Ethiopians. But the people in the Eritrean region of Ethiopia then were feeling so sidelined, they wanted to form their own country. So different people came up. You had the Tigray people. I told you there are over 80 ethnic tribes. So people are very nationalistic about their ethnicity. In Ethiopia, they are their ethnicity first before they're Ethiopians.
So for instance, in the context of Kenya, would you please place that?
So maybe in the context of Kenya, there's Kalenjin, Kikuyu, and everything. It's a big deal in Ethiopia. If we had brought it here in Kenya, I would say the Kikuyus feel like they're a nation on their own. Their own nation.
So
Kalenjin
their first,
nation.
Kenyan
second. So Kenya is just an umbrella shielding mini nations.
Okay. It's like but anyway, we're getting that.
Like the way in Africa is just an umbrella term shielding different countries.
Right. So now we are different nations, all under one nation, umbrella,
one big nation.
Kenya now going back to Ethiopia, which is Ethiopia. Right.
So the Tigrayans had a party called the Tigray People's Liberation Front as early as that time, the TPLF. TPLF wanted to fight. The Eritreans had the Eritrean Liberation Front, ELF, I think. There were the Oromos, there were, everyone. They're all called liberation fronts. It's very interesting because the term liberation front is normally used when people are fighting for self-determination or decolonization, so liberation. So they said, let's come together and fight this regime and push it out. So there was sort of an understanding that we will come together, fight the regime, on the understanding that if we win, then Eritreans will be allowed to have their own country. Right? Now, it's important to note that Eritrea borders the Tigray region. Yes, just next to the Tigrayans. And they actually speak like Tigrinya. They are in the same group of language. Now, they fought the DAG regime, won in 1991, but then the TPLF and Eritreans were like, no, you can't secede. We don't want you to secede. But then one of the major disputes was around territory, because I told you they border each other.
Right.
So there's a territory called Badme that TPLF was saying should be part of Tigray. But if your Eritreans are saying it's Eritrean property, it's Eritrean land. So in 1991, when the TPLF came into power, with the coalition of the other parties from the different parts of Ethiopia, they formed a coalition called the EPRDF, Ethiopia People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF. This coalition ruled now Ethiopia. Now they had a dispute. Eritrea successfully seceded, but they had a long-standing dispute, a long war.
Right.
And then they were for a long time in a state of ceasefire, like a long state of ceasefire. So the EPRDF in 1995, the TPLF was the dominant party in the controlling force in the coalition. So in 1995, it said, we are coming up with a new constitution. We're no longer having a central system of government. This was under Meles Zenawi, who was Tigrayan. He was the president then. When he brought the constitution, he introduced something called ethnic federalism. Ethnic federalism meant Ethiopia would have states, autonomous regions, like the US. You have the Massachusetts state and everything. So similar system. But these regions would be premised on along ethnic lines. They'd be divided along or decided along ethnics, right? So, for example, a few regions I can name are the Tigray region is made up of largely the Tigray people. Right. The Amhara region, the Oromo region, the Somali region. When he introduced ethnic federalism, he said this is the only way to accommodate a large number of Ethiopians because of their identity. The issue of identity is central to them. But the TPLF now under Meles Zenawi ruled Ethiopia for 27 years. Meles Zenawi died, I think it was in 2012, and then Haile Mariam Desalegn came into power. He was the former vice prime minister, I believe. He came into power, and then he continued with this, but the TPLF having dominated the politics for such a long period of time, there were other communities, other ethnicities that are feeling marginalized.
Again.
And sidelined again because, the Tigray people form 6% of the Eritrean population. 6% of 110 million people is around 7 million at most.
That's a very,
and they're the ones controlling the security apparatus,
the national resource.
everything, the national resources. So people, and especially the Oromo people, from the Oromo, they're the largest tribe. They constitute 35% of the Eritrean population. They're like 35 to million people in Ethiopia. And they felt left out. So what happened is protests. Just after Haile Mariam Desalegn took over, protests for almost over 3 years. And these protests were fueled by the Oromo people, who have the largest region.
Right.
There. So then
and huge numbers.
Huge numbers. So then with the Haile Mariam Desalegn was like, I can't do this. He resigned. He said, like, I can't do this. Haile Mariam was not Tigrayan. He came from one of the minority ethnicities. He was like, I can't do this. Let's find another way forward. So the party, the coalition EPRDF, of which Abiy Ahmed was a part, decided that the way forward is to appoint another, is to come up with another prime minister. And that is when Abiy Ahmed was chosen as a prime minister in April 2018 to take over. I would say Abiy Ahmed was almost seen as the right choice then because he's Oromo. So they felt like, okay, you know, the bulk of the protests are from the Oromos. So
this will
yes.
motto. So then he is now still in power, right? Well, as of now, he still is in power. But you said something. You said he was seen as the right choice then. So in your opinion, is he still the right choice?
I will honestly leave that to the Ethiopians.
Okay,
because,
fair enough.
Yes, that question is answered differently depending on how you look at things.
Okay.
But what I will say is this: Abiy Ahmed came with a new philosophy.
Right.
He said, let's stop putting ethnicity at the center of everything. Let's try being united as Ethiopians. His philosophy is actually unity in diversity. You know, unity through diversity.
Through diversity.
Yeah. So he said he came up with a couple of reforms, but one of the first thing he did was make peace with Eritrea. Eritrea and Ethiopia were not seeing eye to eye completely. So he made peace with Eritrea, and that's why he won the Nobel Peace Prize. Because that was a long-standing conflict. And this was a huge achievement for the international community.
And this is precisely now why Eritrea is now involved.
Yes.
Now, what does this have to do with Kenya?
Kenya.
This war that is happening in Ethiopia has brought in Eritrea. Kenya. What does this have to do with us?
So just give me 1 minute before I get to Kenya. I will say that he made peace with Eritrea, and then he went ahead to
Abiy now, yeah?
Yes, Abiy Ahmed. And then he dissolved the coalition, the EPRDF coalition, and formed a new party called the Prosperity Party.
Right.
And he was seen as someone trying to restructure the existing federal system of government into a more centralized system of government. And even before he assumed office, members of TPLF did not agree with dissolving the coalition. So most of them retracted back to Tigray, went back and decided they would set up the operations in Tigray. They were opposed to this new centralization of power. And so were a good number of the Oromo people, because most people want self-determination and autonomy first in Ethiopia. So now, in 2020, Ethiopia was supposed to have its elections.
Yeah.
Elections all over for the regions and for the prime minister. But they were postponed because of the COVID situation.
Right.
So when they were postponed, the TPLF said, we don't recognize this directive of postponing the elections. We are going on with the elections. So the TPLF organized elections in Tigray, their own elections in Tigray, where the TPLF, of course, became the one. And now Debretsion Gebremichael is the president of the Tigray region, right? But then this was against
the directive from the
national
government. Yeah.
Then that was in September.
Central government.
Central government, still called the federal government. That was in September. In November, the TPLF attacked a national military base, which is in Tigray. you know, like the way we have a military bases in different parts of the country. So they attacked the national one in Tigray. And then following that, Abiy Ahmed declared war on TPLF, saying we need to now sort this out. Yeah. So when that happened, he called Eritrea. At first, he was denying that he had supported Eritrea coming into the war, but early this year he admitted, yes, but he said the Eritreans came in because of national security issues. Now, where Kenya comes in is this, Ethiopia is made up of 110 million people. They have one of the highest populations in Africa after Nigeria. They follow Nigeria. They're in the Horn region. The Horn region is very delicate because remember Somalia is still trying to set up well, right?
Its waters is still muddy.
Yes. You have Sudan currently that underwent a revolution in 2019, and currently it's in an unstable state of affairs.
Right.
There's a coup. And then now you have Ethiopia that has 110 million people and a war. So this is a war that has a potential of destabilizing the Horn of Africa. Remember, there's a humanitarian crisis right now in Tigray because when the war broke out, Abiy Ahmed blockaded Tigray. So initially, very few areas, like there were very few routes for supply of food and everything, but he's been blocking them because he has the support of Eritrea. Nothing can come from Eritrea. So now the refugees have been going to Sudan since November 2020. And Sudan is complaining and Sudan is unstable. There's famine in Tigray and everything. TPLF is making very decisive gains. It's taking over. Recently it took Kombolcha, a town in Amhara. So it's taking, and they've made a pact with the Oromo Liberation Front, a military pact. Right. And the Oromo Liberation Front, you would ask why the Oromos are opposing Abiy Ahmed. It's because most Oromos are not for. There's a good number of Oromos who are not for centralization. They want autonomy. They don't want what Abiy wants. They want autonomy. So they're saying the TPLF are the lesser evil. So we'll partner with them. Now, the international community, because of the humanitarian crisis and the instability, they don't want to have another unstable large country in the Horn of Africa. Has been trying to put pressure on both parties to come to the table
and talk.
But these parties are not at all interested in talking, completely not interested in talking because, first of all, Ethiopians don't listen to external interference. That's one thing you need to know. And I think it's an advantage of not being colonized. Is you're not shaken by anything. We're like, no,
we defeated you once, we'll do it again.
We will do this, our way. So external interference, that's why the US has said so many things, but they're not blinking. And even when the war started...
That's the other thing where we should probably explore the particular humanitarian crisis. And with, I think, US made a move to stop the aid flowing into that region. And that's hella dangerous. But so when you speak about Kenyan, as you continue talking about Kenyan involvement, maybe mention a little bit about what it actually means for humanitarian aid being denied. Right.
All right. So first of all, when I bring in, so what the U.S. government said is it was going to cut money for aids such as like education, such things, and even the European Union is saying that because they're saying you can't starve people, like you can't starve part of your country. That's against human rights. Now, because it's been very hard for countries like the U.S. and the West to find a way to get these people to talk. Everyone is looking at Kenya. Kenya is the most stable country, has been for the longest time, the most stable country in the region.
So far.
It is very much involved in peacekeeping missions. We have a good position internationally as a country many states can rely on. So the international community is trying to actually use Uhuru Kenyatta to act as a mediator in this conflict. And this is why Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State from the US, came to Kenya this week. And that's why before he came, Uhuru Kenyatta went to Ethiopia on Sunday.
Right.
And then he came back. So the African Union has its own envoy to the Horn, who is the appointed is Obasanjo, Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of Nigeria. as their envoy to try and work out things here. But they're also using Kenya. I would actually say that Uhuru Kenyatta is being used in the back ways. And, it's actually, I actually hope that Kenya can play a role in de-escalating the conflict.
Okay.
I have more confidence on Uhuru Kenyatta than on Obasanjo.
Okay.
Yes.
I am quite compelled to ask why, other than you being Kenyan.
Yes. So first of all, I feel like it's a bit possible for Ethiopia to listen to an African country like Kenya than for it to listen to an external state outside Africa.
As you said
because
before,
of course their history with interference, they don't like interference. But then the second thing is that we're in the Horn region. We have had military pacts with Ethiopia in the past. We have not taken a side in this war.
Okay.
We don't have, we've never had a problem with Ethiopia.
So that is exactly why we're best suited to handle this.
Yes. And we are in AMISOM together. Ethiopian forces are in Somalia also under AMISOM. In as much as in AMISOM we've been taking different sides, Uganda in Somalia, but it's never jeopardized our relationship with, our standing with Ethiopia. So I believe that this is why Kenya is better placed
to handle this situation.
This situation.
Okay. So my final-ish question is, so Ethiopia is the home for AU. It sits the AU. So what happens in this displacement? I read that at some, so I think it was Al Jazeera or CNN reporting that Egypt had said, we can host this. Does it work like that? Can they say, we can host this, and then they're given to host, and then they're like, oh, now we're safe, bring it back home. So how does that work?
I think, first of all, transferring the headquarters of the African Union would probably need a meeting.
It would be a whole thing.
The assembly, the heads of state and government to come and decide it. And I honestly do not believe that the headquarters is going to be transferred from Ethiopia. I think Egypt was just trying to play around it, because, as you know, Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan are negotiating on the GAD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And so I think Egypt is just, being a bit provocative. But I honestly do not think that the headquarters could ever be transferred unless the situation becomes extremely out of hand, that operations are impossible to continue with, which I don't think the situation has gotten there yet in Addis Ababa. Okay. And I think I listened to a lot of Twitter spaces that Ethiopians put together, and you'd be surprised. So as someone said, there's a lot of misinformation going on right now regarding the conflict from both sides. You don't know who to believe. So even the media, I'm not saying don't believe the media, but you have to question everything you read, in the sense that, for instance, they'll be saying, countries are evacuating. Some countries, Western countries, are evacuating their people from Addis Ababa, saying, the TPLF are going to take over Addis Ababa. But Addis Ababa apparently is relatively okay. Okay. Things are just going on. Right. So that stability is still there for the AU to have its headquarters. Okay, I get it. That is very well clarified. So thank you. Thank you for pointing this out. Thank you for your very well-informed input in this conversation. I think as a parting shot, I would want to know your opinion on whether we see this war actually escalating all the way till the government being overthrown by TPLF and the Oromia forces, or do we see this? The hope is that this comes down, but what are your projections? I would say that this is a conflict that changes every day. Its dynamics. For example, from around November up to around June, the Ethiopian government had the upper hand. And then suddenly from July, tables are turned. So it's a conflict that develops every day. So it's very hard to make projections. But I will say this, the TPLF do not want Abiy Ahmed as a prime minister. Abiy Ahmed sees the TPLF as a terrorist. He actually labeled the TPLF a terrorist group together with the OLF, the Oromo Liberation Front. So the positions are this: you are a terrorist, you are illegitimate as a prime minister. So what I think it's going to be hard to have the Tigrayans, the TPLF, have a dominant role to play again in Ethiopian politics. Okay. So what I will say is I think the TPLF right now are fighting for more autonomy in their region, because they know it's going to be hard for us to control Ethiopia the way we controlled Ethiopia. So they're going to sort of ask for more autonomy, and also want Abiy Ahmed out, because they'll say Abiy Ahmed is a threat to our interests. Abiy Ahmed wants centralization. I don't know what he will decide to do with this. Both sides are very adamant. Abiy Ahmed is rigid.
He wants to stick to his way. Yeah.
Yes. So this is why I really hope that Uhuru Kenyatta, who is really working in the shadows, he's not working like Obasanjo. Obasanjo is always filmed everywhere. I think Uhuru Kenyatta is working in the shadows. I really hope they can come to a settlement, because some Ethiopians who are taking the self-determination autonomy argument are saying there has to be a transition government. Abiy needs to step down. There needs to be a transition government. But, Ethiopians are actually equally divided along these two arguments. Some of them are really supporting Abiy Ahmed. They're saying there are minority groups in the autonomous regions. The small groups, for example, in Eldoret, where Kalenjins are the majority, they're still Kikuyus, Luyas, and everything there. So in a place like maybe Tigray or Amhara, those small other tribes that are not Amhara are saying we are being sidelined from the administration of the region. So centralization works for some of those minority groups. So this is why it's a very complex issue actually. So I will say it keeps developing every day. We should try to focus on getting the war to end, as to have a ceasefire, so that people who are suffering, whether they are the TPLF, whether they are Tigrayans, refugees facing famine, whether they are Amharans who are now part of Amharans or Afars who are now under TPLF control, there needs to be a ceasefire, so that the humanity in us, humans are secured, human rights first are secured. Then you guys with the politics, you can tackle the issue.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yours has been first of all, it has been very relatable, because you've told it almost like not almost like a story, and you have put our role as Kenyans right into the middle of it. So thank you for that contribution. It is beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you for being here. Remember to follow us on all our social media platforms, on Discourse KE. Tell a friend, share, like, engage with us, ask questions, and we shall definitely get back to you. If we need to bring Faith again, we will definitely do that, if she agrees to. So we look forward to engaging with you, and thank you, and bye.